what are the common patterns of the teams that are well performing, right? I would love to be able to look at all of the systems. So you think about you've got email, you've got telephone systems, you've got Salesforce or CRM systems that are out there capturing all the, think about all the systems from ERPs to CRMs to email. Think about all the data that is hidden in an organization that if I could correlate and look for patterns to see, how many emails a day does my most successful organization send? How many Salesforce entries does my most successful team input? And what is the cycle between the time they enter something until the time like, I would love to be able to have an agent that went and looked at all of that and analyzed it and then came back as an executive and said, in your engineering organization, here's the top team and here's all the characteristics of that top performing team.
I'm Felicia Shakiba, and this is Leaderbook AI, where we solve a business challenge in every episode. How can leaders separate real AI value from hype? And where does AI actually create return on investment inside organizations? Robin, welcome to the show. So excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been so excited about this podcast since the first time we talked a month ago, maybe, I think. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm excited to have the conversation.
Well, it's great to have you because you've been working in AI since 2014. So what originally pulled you into the AI space? Would love to just get started there.
I've been in the technology field a lot of years and I saw this vision, but I didn't. The truth is, in 2014, I was running Dell's infrastructure as a service cloud office. And we were late to the cloud game and we were trying to, take these traditional infrastructure customers to the cloud. And I had this CIO at a large global bank say to me, Robin, this cloud computing thing, it's table stakes. He said, what is really going to be valuable someday is when we have these industry specific clouds, but they've also got AI embedded. And those industry specific clouds are going to make entire industries smarter because we will be able to have our own sort of cousins and brothers and community in these clouds and AI specifically geared toward us. So we will, rising tide lifts all boats. And it really intrigued me that here I was thinking cloud computing was the next frontier, and it was. But this CIO of this large global bank was already seeing past cloud as just an infrastructure play, and he was already thinking about artificial intelligence. Honestly, I never even heard the concept that you could be too early to an industry. But as it turns out, I was definitely too early to the AI world. But it's fascinating now to have all that knowledge that I learned 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I guess now, and then see what's happening again. It's really, I kind of, I feel a little optimistic and skeptical because I lived through that wasn't the first, but it was my first AI summer back in 2014.
Wow. Well, it's really interesting to have you on the show to really talk about those early days and where we've come today. Obviously, it's like a very different experience. But when you first started working with AI systems, like over a decade ago, what did the technology actually look like inside organizations then?
Yeah, from a compute perspective and from a systems perspective, it's similar to how it is now. Back then, most people were using on-prem hardware, especially in large enterprise, right? You had your large enterprise IT organizations. Most of the infrastructure was on-prem. in their own data centers. But it isn't like it was in the 70s. We didn't have the big compute capacity that we have now, and we didn't have the big piles and piles of data that we have now. And that was, you know, the processors have gotten better, the chips have gotten better in the last decade, but the infrastructure itself is pretty much the same. Now people have shifted from on-prem infrastructure to cloud computing. The chips are better, and now we're even getting specialized AI, chips specifically for AI functions. But from an infrastructure, basic compute and storage perspective, it wasn't all that different. And the cost now, they went from a CapEx model to an OpEx model. And of course, everything has gotten better, faster, cheaper as technology does over the course of 10 years. AI is not new. They were doing AI at NASA and inside government agencies a long time ago, back when computers cost 30 grand a computer. So it was nothing like going from a $30,000 PC, $2,000 PC that we can now. Nothing like those changes. But the compute was there, the capacity was there. It's cheaper now, but we still had the fundamental elements from a computing perspective.
Yeah. And you've said that AI goes through cycles. So AI springs, summers, winters. What are the patterns that you've seen over the decades?
Yeah, I did a talk one time, and I did this talk about the AI summers and winters. And I did this talk back in 2014, 2015. And I was really looking backwards then. And the cost of computing was the primary barrier for entry in the early days. Like I said, the $30,000 machine, people couldn't buy $30,000 machines to do that compute that they did back in the 80s. But AI has been around. The issue has been that there was always a barrier. So, compute cost, that was one of the barriers back then. Having enough data, if you fast forward, to the 70s and 80s timeframe when it got going again, the big issue then was we didn't have enough data to do real machine learning, because in order to do pattern recognition, you have to have data to do that pattern
Yeah.
recognition. And so that was an issue in the next round of AI. The big issue then was we just didn't make the amount of data that we make now.
Yeah. From your perspective, you having been in this space for a very long time now, what is the biggest misunderstanding that people have today about artificial intelligence?
I worked for two different AI companies back in, 12 years ago. The first AI company I worked for was all about deep learning, was all about knowledge graphs. It was all about teaching the computer, teaching the system how the world works. The second AI company I worked for was all about machine learning and big data sets, and applying algorithms to the big data set. And those two worlds, those are two very different worlds in AI philosophy. What I learned from the first CEO, he said, Robin, AI is only something that can be used to solve a problem that humans could solve if there were enough humans, all eyeballs on that problem, processing all that information. And so, to me, the biggest misconception today is that AI is going to solve something that a whole bunch of humans couldn't solve. So, what I like to say is, I think of artificial intelligence as, if I had all the people and all the hours and all the money to put at a problem, that is where you can point AI to. But you can't point AI or people, quite frankly, to just a vast unknown. You have to actually point it in the direction of something that already exists. A process, a software tool, a data set. You have to be able to have a baseline of knowledge that you just need more eyeballs on it and more cycles to solve the problem. And I think
Yeah.
people might be thinking that AI is thinking on its own. It's not. It's augmenting. If I had enough people to solve this, I could, but I'm just going to solve it better, faster, cheaper, because I have a computer program that can do it better and faster than people.
Yeah. And I think what you're talking about is strategy, understanding particularly what is the problem that you need to solve. And sometimes the problem is finding out what exactly that problem is, right? I mean, it's very difficult if you don't have the intelligence or the information, the analytics, the right people in place to truly identify the correct problem. And I think that's why a lot of companies are misfiring on how they use AI because they are not getting to the root of the problem that they may need to solve. And therefore, every twist and turn or pivot could mean a very different solution. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the way that I'm seeing it now.
I think that's fair. I think that's a very fair assessment of my experience as well.
Yeah. And you draw on like a really strong distinction between automation and real AI. How should leaders think about the difference between these two?
It's kind of the low-hanging fruit for me. It's what can I automate? That's what you need to be doing right now. That is, in my opinion, that's the low-hanging fruit that organizations should be looking at from, early adopter of AI is what type of things can I automate? The assistant, the virtual assistant, the chat bot. I mean, those are kind of no-brainers, and if you're not doing that, then you're really missing the boat right now because that's table stakes in my opinion. And so I feel like automating things that would take me forever to do, I'm so grateful I have AI to do that now. Right? Go read these 12 proposals and net it out for me, right? That is, I love having the capability to do that now. And I think that's the user interface, right? That technology existed 10 years ago, but we didn't serve it up the way that we're serving up that capability today. And so that user interface, in my opinion, is what's really changed how we're making it so much easier for people to engage with AI. It's that user interface that we're all falling in love with, where I can just ask a question and I get all these great answers. But to me, automation is the first step. That is what we should be looking at from a business process or a business systems perspective. We need to be looking at those things that we can automate or speed up. That's the low hanging fruit.
Yeah. At AWS, what other things do you use AI for? What is the biggest return on investment for you?
It's the answering emails. It's the looking through business plans. Every year we sit down and every account team writes pages and pages of business plans, and getting people up to speed quickly on what's going on can be done so easily by using AI. And I think from a leadership perspective, how do you really know what's going on in your business? That's where these chatbots and these agents that can be quickly coded can really help leaders figure out the core truth about what's really going on in the business. And if you think about just from a business perspective and a leadership perspective, one of the hardest things for you to do is really get your mind around what's really going on, right? I liken it to 20 years ago when I used to stand up in front of my vice president at Dell and do a readout on my business and talk about my account. And here's all the relationships that we have. Here are the 5 strategic priorities that this account is trying to solve. Here's how I'm aligning, right? We would stand up in front of executive teams and pitch the executives on our business, right? Every quarter, twice a year, something like that. Today, you shouldn't have to do that because the executives should easily be able in that much time to take a look at their top 50 accounts, get with AI, look at those account plans and no more, that knowledge where I would be dumping all of that. And quite frankly, the executive had no idea if I was telling them the truth or not, right? There was all this
Yeah.
bias that I would be reporting on because, of course, I'm not going to stand up and talk about all the things that I don't know. I'm going to only talk about the things I do know. And whether they were aligned to the most strategic priorities or not, nobody could validate or check that. Now, today, as an executive, you have got so much more visibility and unbiased knowledge into what's going on, that if they're not using AI in order to get smart about the business, then they're just relying on that institutional biased reporting from the trenches, so to speak.
I couldn't agree with you more, Robin. I feel like the visibility is really a big piece of the return on investment, even though it's not necessarily calculated. But the amount of time and where executives spend their time and where people in general spend their time within the organization, I think that is a really key piece. But the challenge is that it is very difficult for organizations to actually calculate that value of AI. Like how does that work? What is your recommendation on how we can actually see what that ROI is?
Right. You can't say what the ROI is if you don't currently know what is the current status, right? How much time do I spend a day answering emails? Nobody knows. I don't even
Too
know,
much.
right?
Too much
Yeah,
time.
no kidding. No kidding. But but you can't show the improvement because what you're really trying to do is show the improvement, right? Current state is X, but because I implemented all of this great automation and technology, I'm now delivering it at Y, but we don't know X. Right. Even in our large enterprise customers, just large enterprises that are out there operating, they don't know how much time does it take Johnny to do task Y? They don't know. And so, in order to show what that ROI is, you're going to have to start tracking how much time people are actually spending doing the task that you're trying to automate and improve. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, and you
Okay.
need that baseline. And sometimes getting that baseline is the hardest thing because then you're like, okay, if I need a baseline, I need to probably clean my data, right? And then
Mm.
how do you clean your data depending on what it is that you're measuring, right? But how do you get an accurate baseline, which is I think one of the biggest challenges to be honest.
I couldn't agree more. I think that if somebody could solve that, that would be the $1 billion opportunity is if somebody could solve that problem for us. But it's hard. The second AI company I worked for back in, I think it was around 2015, 2016, they had a button made that was the Ghostbuster sign that said no science projects, because oftentimes the people that were working on AI were oftentimes over in the research side of a company, and it wasn't really the business side of a company. And so we didn't want to do we didn't want to just continue to work on science projects. We wanted to work on actual business challenges. And it's hard when you're trying to make that leap between this is really cool technology and I know we should be using it and it does a lot of cool things to, yeah, but what is the ROI on that investment? When you start looking at some of the large language models and pricing that goes along with some of those large language models, when you're really using it and integrate, it's expensive. It is very expensive at an enterprise scale. And so you better be able to track the ROI or somebody's going to say, no, we're not doing this.
Yeah, exactly. I think in order for you to actually follow through and make sure that you are continuously adding return on investment, you have to be able to track the data,
You have to.
right? Yeah.
You have to. But some things aren't data. Some things. So let's pretend for a second that Johnny is working in a manufacturing facility and he's going and picking up a piece of sheet metal and he's walking that sheet metal over to a welder. And that welder starts, and this is in your cars. This is the manufacturing of cars, manufacturing of airplanes, satellites. Johnny walks that sheet metal over to the welder, and some of that data, there is no data. It's just like you take that piece of sheet metal off of that shelf, you go put it on that welding table. Let's pretend that welder burns a hole in it He takes that sheet metal off, he puts it on the ground, he goes and gets another piece. There are dark spots in an organization. Well, could that process be automated with AI? 100% think that it could be, right? That process that I'm describing could be automated by a robot, spot robot dog could go pick that up and bring it over and do the welding. But right now, today, a lot of that process isn't even captured in a system, right? It's dark.
Right.
And so, could I automate that process? Yes, I probably could. Could I make that process better? Yes, I probably could. But today, there's not even any data for me to turn around and look at it and say, I can do it with a robot this much cheaper, this much faster, this much more accuracy because I'm not capturing that data today.
Yeah. And a lot of that data is qualitative data. It's understanding from the human
Exactly.
perspective. Yeah, like what are people seeing and what are people feeling? And if they're willing to even share that data, right? Because some people are like, well, if I think that that a robot is gonna take over my job, why would I explain or tell them
Exactly.
what to do with this? So
Exactly.
that just doesn't get surfaced, and I think we're unfortunately on a little bit longer of a path in getting there, but
I think
I
so.
think that there's a place for people to upskill themselves to instead of moving the sheets or moving the material around the warehouse, if you will, in a manufacturing facility, it's about how do you manage the robots? How do you maintain the robots in order to do that work, right? So there's this big shift happening that we're seeing from a leader book perspective on how we can, support teams like that. But it is a long road, I would say, because you really have to get people's trust to help collect that information and understand what even to change,
Exactly.
right? Yeah. And I know many companies are announcing the layoffs and attributing, them to AI. What from what you've seen in the market, do you think that's reality or is it narrative?
You know, I think that we can always use data to tell whatever story we want to tell. I had a CFO one time say, Robin, I can make the numbers say whatever you want them to say. Just tell me what narrative you're trying to spin, and I can work the numbers, I can work the data to back up that story. And it's sad that's sad, but it's true. And so I don't believe all the layoffs that we're seeing are truly a one-to-one correlation with AI. Now, there are certain jobs I definitely know that every single person in the world, not even just American, but every single person that calls into a call center knows that that experience is drastically different than it was 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. When you think about the call center space, there's a ton of automation that is going on there, and there are pockets of jobs that are being lost to that automation. No doubt about it, but I don't believe the hype that I hear in the news around, you know, AI is taking 50,000 jobs and these specific I think that that is I don't believe that. I would really have to dig into the data to for me to believe that narrative.
I think I agree with you. And I don't have any specific examples. Honestly, I don't have any data to back it up. But from my experience and what I understand and what I know, when AI started, when it really started to take effect, with OpenAI being announced and the additional competitors, I think that leaders saw an opportunity and reason to lay off chunks of the workforce that maybe was on their agenda in the beginning and didn't really have the narrative to do it, and now they did, and they maybe took advantage of it. And I think that, as executives, like their job isn't just to engage the workforce and attract talent. It's also to ensure that they have the best return on investment for their shareholders. And they now had the opportunity to do it. And I can't say that I blame them because that is their job. And Anybody in that seat, if they're doing a better job, they get to keep their own job, right? And so it's really unfortunate, but I think that there's better ways to do it, right? I mean, there's companies out there that just, you wake up in the morning, you don't have access to anything, and it's like goodbye, maybe 1 month severance. But then there's companies that are like, here's what's coming. We're going to help you get career resources. We're going to upskill you. We're going to change we're not going to we're just going to stop backfills. There's so many ways of doing it the right way. And I think that at least the companies that were doing the layoffs could have maybe done it with a little bit more grace. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, human empathy. I think that, especially in my career for 30 years, being in high tech, large organizations, mass layoffs are nothing new, right?
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
just blaming them on AI is new. It is new to hear that narrative. And I think, I agree with you that you would really have to show. I just haven't personally seen, and like I said, I've been in the AI space since 2014, and I just haven't seen full entire organizations being wiped out by AI, except in that customer contact center, that those I do have deep empathy. I mean, I really do have deep empathy for that particular industry, because I have seen, you just don't need that front line. Thank you for calling today. How may I direct your call? That used to be a person. And now today, that's an AI that is doing that. And so I'm very sensitive to that particular industry, because I have seen complete, customer success, customer service, call centers being automated. And you used to have that front line and even second line human. And now that's fully automated with natural language processing. And so I have seen that. But outside of that, I have not seen major changes. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting because I had called a restaurant recently and AI had answered the phone and I had this very complex request. I had a very complex request where it was like, 6 of us and I was saying, if we came at this time, could we get like an indoor or an outdoor seating or whatnot? And the AI could not answer my questions. And it was such a frustrating experience. And I almost feel like, there has to be some sort of backup human to immediately, right? Not just, oh, well, we'll call you back with a human. It's like, if you are not getting your answer, you need to be able to still speak to a human. Otherwise, the client or the customer experience just has a really bad taste in your mouth. I think that the companies that actually make, and you can push back on me on this, but some companies and maybe some industries, I think if they actually keep humans on the call to have a better customer experience than those who are using AI, actually might come up on top. And I don't know. I mean, I think it would be a really interesting study to look at.
Yeah, I think that even if you have really good systems, that natural language processing is so good now that it can actually tell this person, this human on the other end of this phone is getting frustrated. Their voice, the tone of their voice is changing. So if I were queen for the day and I could, be in that scenario, I would say, as soon as I would flag, as soon as you hear the human raise their voice, or you start to hear a change of tone in the voice, automatically direct that call to a human. And you see all these funny memes on social media, right? Where people are yelling at their banking app saying, representative, representative, give me a representative.
Yes, representative.
That's my husband. He refuses to go through any automated voice prompt at all. And so it doesn't matter what system he's talking to, the very first thing out of his mouth is representative, representative. He refuses to go through anything. But if I were queen for the day and I owned a company that had that type of software, I'd be saying exactly what you're talking about, right? As soon as you hear a sign of distress, the human needs to automatically jump in and pick up the phone. And
Yeah.
again, but
Yeah.
you could still do that job with fewer humans, because
Yes.
out of the 10 calls that AI took that day, it worked perfectly. And your one example, where you had all of these different variables that the AI that confused the AI, it only needed you one time that it only needed a human one time that day versus the other 10 that were able to be automated.
Yeah. Yeah, fair. If you were advising leaders right now, where is the area you believe AI could be the most or could create the most meaningful impact in the real world? And I know you've kind of hinted at it and suggested at it as we've gone through this interview, but what is your final thought?
Yeah, I really do think it's if I am counseling leaders, if they aren't using AI today to get a real in-depth look at their business, I think that's what they're missing. That's what they're missing out on. Where are the bottlenecks? Where are the organizations? I would love to be able to look across my business and be able to tell, you know, what are the common patterns of the teams that are well performing, right? I would love to be able to look at all of the systems. So you think about you've got email, you've got telephone systems, you've got Salesforce or, CRM systems that are out there capturing all the think about all the systems from ERPs to CRMs to email. Think about all the data that is hidden in an organization that if I could correlate and look for patterns to see, how many emails a day does my most successful organization send? How many Salesforce entries does my most successful team input? And what is the cycle between the time they enter something until the time like I would love to be able to have an agent that went and looked at all of that and analyzed it and then came back as an executive and said, in your engineering organization, here's the top team and here's all the characteristics of that top performing team. In your manufacturing data, in your sales data. If I were the CEO or in the C suite of an organization, I would find somebody in my organization or a partner that could go help me get access and make valuable insights out of all the hidden data that's already in my systems. That data is there. It's just making sense of it and bringing that to the forefront. I would love to be able to do that. And as an executive, I would love to have access to that, right? That's like the
Yeah.
holy grail. Oh my gosh, show me all the data behind this team or a leader, right? Show me, man, I've got this one leader and their teams always really perform above bar. What? Tell me, give me the recipe.
What are they doing?
Yeah. What
What
are
are
they
they doing?
doing?
Exactly.
I
I
would love
love
it.
that idea. I know. I love that idea. I love that you shared that because it's a response that I don't get from a lot of leaders, but it is always what is on, the people operations team. I was doing talent management for some really big corporations, and that's really all we did. But actually finding out who your top performers are is also an endeavor. So maybe another
Yes.
episode. for it.
And also not biased, right? That's
Right.
also right. I mean, it can be so biased how people feel about a certain leader. And the thing that I love about I really do love it, is that it doesn't have the same bias. It doesn't have the same bias that we as people do,
That's really important.
as long as it's programmed. Now, there's
As
all
long as, long as it's programmed correctly.
whoever's programming the AI, yeah, exactly. Whoever's programming the AI better not have bias. But anyway, there is bias in that. We've seen that proven by Google search, right? We've seen when certain people Google certain things and they're only given a subset of the. Yeah, that was fascinating. That exposed a lot of bias when that report came out showing all of that. So we're only as good as the bias that's written into the AI. Yeah, I would love to be able to have a system like that. If I'm a leader in a large organization, to be able to that's what everybody wants to know. Tell me the truth. Give me the real about what's going on in my business. And I think through the data, the answers are there. You just have to be able to get putting all those puzzle pieces together across all those different systems to give you a real picture of what's really going on in your organization.
Absolutely. Well, Robin, this has been a fantastic chat. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for sharing your knowledge and experience with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's fun to go back and think about I don't get to think about AI, um, in my normal everyday work that I'm doing, so it's really fun to have this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you. Visit us at leaderbook.ai. Your support as a subscriber means the world to us. So thank you for tuning in. I'm Felicia Shakiba. Let's connect on LinkedIn.